Communication is always one of the hot topics. How can we do that better? We're stuffing it up, we're getting it wrong. And it's expressed as conflict, that people feel there's a lot of conflict when communication isn't working right. And when it gets like that, we waste a lot of energy, a lot of time trying to communicate and failing. So this module, we've picked this out as a single most important topic that we need to devote a whole module to, because it's universal. It applies to every kind of organization, every individual, and let's work it through. Now, to introduce this, let me share with you first of all my favorite image of what I think communication is like in most workplaces. Okay, it doesn't look much like a workplace, but this really represents communication at work for me. If one person doesn't want to listen, the other person has to shout louder to be heard. Now that might not be in volume, but they have to certainly work harder and harder and harder to get their message across. But if the person really doesn't want to listen, then they put up a barrier. In this image, it's a newspaper. But there are lots of other ways that we put up barriers. We make it hard for people to communicate with us. And particularly if we don't like what they're saying to us. We close our ears, we get defensive. We come up with all sorts of reasons why what they're saying is not true or not valid. And people start destroying the character of that other person, and so on. But the stronger our defense mechanisms, the harder we make it for other people to communicate with us, the harder they work. And you end up in this vicious cycle that is represented in this picture, with somebody shouting and the other person really not listening. What's the point? Now, I reckon I learned from one of my favorite gurus, Michael Neill, that there are three elements to effective communication, and I want to establish these right from the outset. Communication will not work if the quality of the relationship between us is poor. If you don't trust what I have to say as having legitimacy, if you don't, for whatever reason, you doubt what I have to say as having any use to you, then you're going to be listening with a different set of ears to if you think that I am somebody well worth listening to, and we've established some trust through the first module, for example, that you found that quite useful. That helps me now to communicate with you. It helps you to listen better. So the quality of the relationship, we might have to go and do something about that first before we try to get our message across. Secondly, maybe it's our emotional state. If you've been in a situation where you've had to give somebody a bit of critical feedback, you'll know that emotional state goes haywire. People get upset. They walk out of the room, and all sorts of unpleasant things happening. But if you try to give that feedback at the wrong moment, when somebody is already upset, it's just not going to work. Their ears are already closed. So we need to work on getting us both in the right emotional state. You need to be in the right state right now to be able to concentrate on what we're talking about. If you're surrounded by crying children and being interrupted every 2 minutes with somebody coming into your room and asking for a bit of help, your emotional state is wrong because you're distracted by too much stuff happening round about you. So if that's the case, you need to protect yourself. You need to create the space and choose the time when you're going to be able to listen so that we can really communicate. It's the same in any workplace. You've got to manage emotional states to make sure that people are both ready for the conversation. The third thing that goes wrong is intention. We need to be very clear about the outcome that we're looking for from any piece of communication. I have an intention right now of sharing with you as many ideas as I can in the space that we've got that will help you to become a more effective leader and manager. That's my intention. If that is not the outcome, and you just go through the motions and nothing changes as a result of what we're talking about here, my intention has not been achieved. It's not matched by the outcome. In other words, this is just a lot of hot air. On the other hand, when you take action, when you learn something new, when you change the way that you work as a result of what we're talking about, then my intention has turned it into an outcome. And for me, that's the defining characteristic of communication, that it makes a difference, that it has an impact. If it doesn't change anything, it's just hot air. So think about that when we're looking at all of these different, the segments we're going to cover in this module on communication. It boils down to those three things. Your intention needs to be matched with the outcome as much as possible. You need to perhaps work on the quality of relationships, and you may need to work on the emotional state of participants for any of the rest of this to work. Having said that, the skills we're going to cover are these. First of all, we're going to look at communication styles. Not just your own style, but so that you can recognize the way that other people think, what motivates them and what they're going to engage with, so that you can communicate, get your message across really effectively. We're going to look at listening skills, so that you can develop and crank up your ability to listen and understand to what other people are saying or expressing to you. We also need to pay some attention to asserting, so that you don't have to get what you need through force, or even worse, just don't raise issues when they need to be raised. We're going to build on that by looking at 5 different conflict styles, the different implications of each of these, and you can think about which you tend to prefer and which might be a better way of resolving conflict in different circumstances. We're going to come back to the issue of feedback, giving and receiving feedback, and go into a little bit more depth than we already have. Because at the end of the day, without that happening in an organization, there is no communication. We need feedback, and we need to be having it make a difference. And finally, in this module, we're going to look at working with difficult people. And I hope to change the way you think about this, so that you actually start to look forward to and appreciate difficult people in another way, and see them in a completely different light, so that it actually becomes quite easy to work with them. So again, this module, those are the topics we're going to work through. Work through them at your own pace, at your own time. What I'm looking for is that it makes a difference, so that my intention is matched by the outcome with you, that it really makes that difference.